Okay, so before I jump into LEM, I just have a couple of questions for you guys. So in your daily jobs, how often do you integrate, or how often do you have to access logs? Or are you actually using, are you digging into Syslog data? Are you actively using logs as part of troubleshooting, or are you still
every
using
day?
More on the?
Of course, every single day.
Yeah, every single day?
Yep.
Okay. Now, when you access those logs, are you typically going into a Syslog server, or are you interfacing with some sort of security information, event management, or some sort of log tool that you may have?
Yes. I use both.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. It just gives me, they've moved into the marketing side, so it kind of helps me understand where you guys are going. So, so the Log and Event Manager is basically a security information event management tool. It's been around since 2001. It was formerly Trigeo Network Security. Trigeo pretty heavily marketed the SMB market. And the whole design behind this product was, if you're familiar with some of the others out there, the ArcSites and other products, they approached log analysis purely from a forensic standpoint, right? I need to jump into logs, I need to figure out what happened, whether it's for security or for network troubleshooting. Log and Event Manager takes the approach of, why can't I use that data more proactively? All right, so let's design a product that says, okay, if we discover something that happened and we want to know about it again, or we want to be alerted before it causes further damage, let's leverage the logs that we're collecting and notify us early. So like if you take, for example, the advanced persistent threats out there, typically they are a combination of several different pieces or several different things that happen within your network. It could be software installs, it could be authentication events, it could be network traffic inbound or outbound, right? Well, your logs have all that information. So you can leverage what we call our correlation engine to look for those specific behaviors and then notify you, right? So if you see some software installs on systems that are provisioned with specific types of applications, and that's not one of those types of applications, that's an anomaly. We need to know about that. So that's what the Log and Event Manager does. So before I'll go deeper into that, but before we do that, let me kind of break down how it's set up. So now this is different from the Orion product in that it is a completely separate product, right? It's a virtual appliance. It has its own database, sits on its own operating system, and it's actually by design. One of the primary reasons people purchase a product like this is for compliance, right? So that data must be secured. Mm-hmm. So LEM is designed to secure the data as it collects it as well. So basically, where's my marker here? Okay. So what we have is the virtual appliance, all right? VM sitting on a Linux backend. Forgive my chicken scratch here. So it's a Linux backend, and it runs it's a Postgres database with a Lucene indexing engine around it. And the reason for the two is compression, right? So we're able to achieve right around a 40 to 60 to 1 compression, or 95 to 98%, which means that you can store more data in less space. And if you're collecting logs from everything, right, you need that. So we need to maximize the space that's available. So that's the database that sits on there. So Linux, so we've got Lucene with Postgres. Okay, so everything is hardened to protect the information. So within the appliance, you have some different features that are embedded. So one of them is the real-time correlation engine, right? So we call it a real-time correlation engine. So I'll just put a little box right here, because it processes data at network speeds or in memory. Right? So it's not populating the database first. It's not being indexed, and it's not being, classified and so on, right? It's literally, it goes through the correlation engine. The correlation says, hey, does it meet this certain criteria? Do I need to alert? All right? And then think of it as like a copy or a separate channel that pipes the data into the database. Okay? So you have your in-memory correlation engine, then you have your database, right? That stores, index, and it's there for searching and reporting. Okay. Now, before you can correlate, obviously you've got to collect. So we really have two primary methods of data collection. For the majority of your network devices that you're going to support, it's Syslog, right? So typical, or similar to what you're probably doing right now, you're going into a Syslog server or something like that. LEM has a Syslog engine in there as well. It's basically Syslog NG. Okay. So you've got your Syslog. collection from routers, firewall switches, intrusion detection systems, anything syslog based. And then you have your operating systems, right? So your operating systems, your servers, and your workstations, because we do go down to the endpoint, they require an agent. Okay, so the agent will compress and encrypt that data. So, typically when you're collecting data from servers and workstations, on top of your syslog, that's a lot of data traversing the wire, right? So the agent compresses it to the point where it's literally less than your authentication traffic in AD, right? So a very, very small footprint. And it adds another layer of security to prevent tampering of those logs during collection as well. So if you're looking at compliance and whatnot. Okay. Now, whether it's when it comes to the other thing that I should say that LEM does is it translates or normalizes the data, right? Basically, a user logon is a user logon regardless if it's somebody logging on to a switch, a router, or an operating system, right? So all logons get mapped to a logon event, which is a taxonomy, right, that sits within LEM. Right, so as they come in, the logs are analyzed and then mapped to events and then fields, and I'll show you the events and fields here in a moment, within the taxonomy. Yes.
Is that configurable? Because I've seen all sorts of weird log formats coming from things.
So we do all of the mapping in-house, right? We call those connectors. They're basically XML files that either sit on the appliance itself or within the agent. And they directly map data from the log into the appropriate fields. So if you need additional connectors, we provide that as a service. So it's a part of your support. So you request, hey, I need to support this particular application or this device that's not currently supported, and we'll collect samples and then we'll do the mapping. Now, the reason why we do that is, one, we can ensure that the mapping is done properly, so that if you've got rules that are already in place, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Right, they'll still work with the new data that's coming in, right? And the other thing is it's 100% supported. So if that connector breaks for whatever reason, you call us up, we fix it. Okay, and we also keep it updated, right? So we have regular connector updates or translator updates, if that's what you want to call it, so that we're on top of that, and so we can make sure that any new events that get added or any difference in the way that they are logged, information-wise, that gets handled as well.
Yeah, they changed the format and you gotta...
Exactly. Okay, so that's at a basic level how it's set up, right? Any questions on that? Did I confuse any of you all or with all that? Okay, so let's kind of jump into the product here. So the way that I like to think, or I like to see LEM used, I've done a lot of training around Log and Event Manager and so on, and really it's a breakdown between forensics and real-time analysis. That's what it comes down to, right? So, and you can do all of that within the console here. So we get the logs, and just to give you an idea how that works, so I'll just click on a log here. So what we're seeing right now is the monitor section up here. This is a real-time view of the logs as they're being collected. Now, this can come in handy for troubleshooting, right? So if I want to look at traffic from one source to a destination in the logs, I want to look at those traffic logs, I can set that up in here. But as you can see, we put a lot of that together for you. So I've got different devices, I've got different filters here filtering out certain types of data, okay? Now, click on, there we go. So we'll click on like this UDP traffic event right here. So if we look at the UDP traffic event, basically, we take all the information out of the log and we parse it into these fields here. So we've got our date timestamps. We see what device is sending that data. We've got any coding related to that, so a severity level of some sort that's embedded in there, so you can filter on that. You've also got source, destination, port, interface, protocol, all of these are the fields that you can use. Now, as I go through the product, you'll see I can use those fields everywhere. Right? So in the monitor section right here, if I want to look at data from this particular IP address, right, just that IP address, then I could come up here and I can create a new filter. Okay, and that jumps into our filter interface. Now what you'll see is the filter interface, the search interface, and the correlation interface are very similar in the way that they're set up. Everything uses an and/or logic. Okay, what we tried to do here with the way we visualize the configuration of filters and rules and searches is take out the need for nested parentheses, if then else statements, try to simplify it, right? Because we want to make it more usable. So everything is drag and drop. So if I want to look at traffic, I can either type in TCP because that's what I want to focus on, or I can look at all network traffic down here using groups. Okay, I can do it that way. So if we go back up to TCP, there's my TCP event, and then here's all the fields that I can use. So if I only want traffic sourcing from a particular system, then I can drag it into place. Now when I do that, it sets up an immediate group, and then the logic's in place as well. So your logic is built in out here on the outside. So I just click to change. So I can and it right here, or there, and then I can add another group, and ignore that. So you can be as simple or as complex as you need to be when it comes to filtering out the data. Okay, so it makes it pretty flexible. Okay, then I can just type in my information, save the filter, and it would filter out that data. Okay. Now I can also take that information, any filter I have, and turn that into a search. So if I'm within an event and I want to look up that IP address right here, I can highlight that IP address, right, and then search it. So now I go into forensics. Now we call our search interface in depth. So it's under this main Explorer engine. So when I do that, when I initiate that search, it drops it into my search bar up here and then does a 10-minute search for me. Okay? So now when it does that search, it's basically saying, I want to see anything, any event that contains that IP address. So the advantage here is, while your first concern might be network traffic, you might find out that that IP address was associated with an authentication event to a server, right? Or a change event of some sort, right? So it will list that out here. So it shows all my events here, and then these categories down here break it out in different ways. So I see all the IP addresses associated with it. If there were any usernames involved, I would see that here. And then other information that you could take advantage of. Now it's going to graph it, so it gives you a histogram, a timeline that you can double click and drill down into, plus some other utilities to visualize that data. All right, so like a word cloud right here to surface some information. So every time you initiate a search within the interface there, it's trying to surface data for you. All right, so it's trying to add some intelligence to it wherever it can. But if you want to look at just the results of that information, or that search, I should say, then you could just jump right into the logs and take a look at what's in those logs. Yeah. Okay. So when I'm training people, what I tell them is, you can be easily overwhelmed by the amount of data that comes into a product. Logs are logs, and there's millions of them that come in. So use the other portions of the interface to help kind of get some bearing. So when I look at the refined fields here, this gives me some bearings on what events occurred. So then I can start to double click or click down or drill down into, deeper into that data without having to look at just a whole bunch of logs all at once. Okay? So it can definitely speed that up. And I don't necessarily have to initiate the search from the filter. I can type in whatever I want up here, or I can come down and I can use the search builder and use that same and or logic, same drag and drop interface to initiate a search. Okay? So we add some consistency in the interface wherever we can.
How many devices are you supporting?
So it really depends, right? We go more on volume rather than the number of devices. So gigs per day and so on.
No, but I mean you've got to have a mapping from X vendor's device to something that you understand. So how many vendors do you support mappings for?
So over 800 and counting right now. Wow. Is what we're supporting. And so we have a team that's dedicated to these mappings, and a lot of it's based on customer requests, right? So as new products come out, as new applications come out, they request those. But wherever we can, we're on top of it. We see some, a particular device that's really popular, we'll go, map it when we can.
Gotcha.
Do you have the ability to exclude noisy data before it ever gets into the database?
Yes, to some extent, yes. So we do that, we do research when we build the connectors in the first place. So if there is noisy data, we can, if we knew, basically the way we look at it, if there is no useful information in that log, then we will exclude it within the connector itself, okay? Uh-huh. But for those that are like, no, I want everything, right? Then you can use the interface to exclude either within your alerting, within your filtering, or within your views that you want to apply to the console, right?
I've grabbed Syslog data from a couple of customers over a month or two and discovered that if you eliminate, usually it's the top 10 that I totally don't care about, like somebody logged in, I don't care. And it shrinks it by a factor of 1,000.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do that in some of our connectors we do that automatically, or you have what's called a policy editor within the login event manager that allows you to remove some events as well.
So you mentioned that this was Syslog Engine on the back end. Does the policy editor allow for a lot of the same type of regular expression filters that Syslog Engine supports?
Not within LEM itself. So access to the Syslog engine within LEM is secured. So it's you can't manipulate that. But on your Syslog server or on if you're forwarding from a Syslog server, you could do it at that level.
All right.
So Syslog NG or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of brings me to the heart of the product, and that is the correlation engine. Okay, so this is what we call a non-linear correlation engine, right? Basically, what we're doing is we're removing the need, again, for the if, then, else, nested parentheses. Basically, it's a sliding time window that we use. So you use the logic, and I'll bring up a rule here. There we go. So you'll see right here under the correlation there is a correlation time window, right? This response window is the sliding window that we use for correlation. So if those events occur based off of what we define in the correlation rule within that time, then that's considered that it meets the criteria of the rule. The rule, sets off the alert or performs the action. Okay, so here's our correlation window. Again, very similar, if not exactly the same as the search and the filter interface. So you just drag and drop, you create your logic in here. Then you define your simple or advanced or both thresholds. So right here I can say, well, I don't want to be notified or I don't want an action taken unless this happens, 100 times in 30 seconds. Okay, so you can define that window as well. Then you can take it a step further and say, well, I don't want that to happen unless it's 100 times in 30 seconds, but it all has to come from the same source. So I can use the same fields that I've used in search, that I've used in filters, to say same source but different destination, same source but different port. I can add that additional criteria to the rule. So that is what we try to do to reduce false positives, right? Use simple advanced thresholding to only alert when it's supposed to. And you can create exclusions in here, to your point as well. So if you've got a particularly noisy server or a noisy networking device, you can create a list, right? What we call a user-defined group. And you can say, okay, alert me, but exclude these IP addresses or host names or usernames or a mix of that information as well. And you can add as much logic and individual and advanced or individual and overall thresholds within the rules you want. So a lot of our rules will have, some complex analysis that it's performing, right? That would take 100 individual rules to do, right? So you can put all that logic in a single rule, so you don't have to have one rule checking the other, checking the other, checking the other to make sure it fires. So it helps you kind of consolidate all that into a single rule, so it can help with, building well-defined alerts. So you have your actions area here as well. So this is where you can define, send me an email with all of the specific information that I need. So you can build your own email templates. You can use the existing templates that come with the product out of the box. But over here on the left-hand side, we also have what we call active responses. Okay, let's see if I can slide this over a little bit.
That's what I was looking for.
There we go. Okay, right here. Now the majority of these active responses are Windows-based, right? So we can do everything from detach USB drives, we can kick a user off the system, we can shut that system down, disable its network card, we can reboot, kill application or processes, services, and other types of actions, remove and add users to groups. On the networking side, we can block an IP address. So basically what we're doing is using your firewall to block an IP, right? So we have an interface that you create, you define the rule, and then it can go in and block that IP address. So like a SAM block on a checkpoint, a shun on a Cisco device, right? A Juniper untrust or something like that. It'll go in and automatically initiate those commands.
So it's effectively real-time black holing.
Yeah.
What firewall platforms do you support for that?
A lot. Oh, for active response, actually quite a few. I think the only one that we haven't done a response for is Palo Alto. I think that's it, but I think that's also in the works. But Cisco, Juniper, we support even IP tables and
Oh, cool.
even some of the other obscure ones, FortiGate, and a lot of the other ones as well.
SRX.
Yeah, SRX as well.
As you mentioned IP tables, can you have a list of hosts that need to have the IP tables updated so you can push that to all those hosts?
Yes, yes, you can. So so within the action you can define the list. Yeah. So. Any other questions? Okay, still got a few minutes here. So the last portion I'll talk about here is the Op Center view. Now this is purely for visualization, but it also contains, so when you're talking about correlation rules, there's well over 700 that are pre-built within the product that you can use, right? So you can go in and pick and choose, you can search. That's also a bit overwhelming. So what we did just recently in our latest release is we created a couple of wizards that will help you kind of pick and choose the rules that you need, enable them, set up email all within just a few minutes. Okay, so that's what we have right here is this, specify conditions where you want them to alert you. So we go in, and then it'll bring up a wizard where we can select what categories that we want. Do we want to do it based off of devices, endpoint, operations, security, change management? Okay, then I can select which ones that I want. Maybe. And hit next over here, and then it'll bring up a list of rules or categories, right? So there's general best practices, what it has already selected, but then I can go in and say, well, I want policy changes as well. Okay, then I can go next again, and it'll show me, all right, if I want to do compliance, we'll say it's HIPAA, so we'll select a rule set for HIPAA as well. Okay, and then it walks me through setting up which users I want to receive those emails. Okay, where's my SMTP server that I want to use to forward those events. Okay. Oh, we got to select that. So we'll do.
This actually logs into the email server and authenticates. It's not just relaying.
It will attempt to. It's just a relay, basically. So it'll use the email server as a relay. If you have it, locked down, you would need to add an exception for LEM in there. But other than that, it does actually. You'll give it it will only log in if you require it. Put it that way. So you can put in a user and password and do that. But basically, then it'll go through and it'll select those rules, right? It'll enable those rules, and you'll get notifications. You can always go back in and change, and you can always go to the individual rules themselves and edit as well to add any exclusions and whatnot. And then there's also just a basic configuration window. So for evaluation purposes, we want to speed up that whole process of let's get it installed, let's get some useful information. Right? So the configuration and the rules wizard are designed to help you do that. To see is this going to be right for my business for the logs that I'm collecting. So try to make that a much quicker process when it comes to that. Okay. And then you have these widgets down here within the Op Center that basically, again, they just allow you to visualize your data. So there's going to be out of the box widget looking at things like the top 10 events, the top 10 nodes by event count. And then it also has drill down capabilities, right? So I can come in and I see, a particular spike or maybe an event that I'm not used to seeing. I can click on that. It'll take me to the real-time data, pause it on those particular events so that I can look at the details as well. So if you do have a console in front of you, you can have some visualization. And if something looks out of the ordinary, you can click, drill down, and see the information as well.
Thank you for not saying double click.
I think there's a question I think we forgot to ask here, which is, does this require Flash, Java, Shockwave, anything else to run in the browser?
So this is based on the Adobe Flex platform for the visual. Yeah, I know. So I don't, I'm not sure if we're having any inroads to changing that in the near future, but
you can upgrade to Java instead. You think?
The version that I worked on when I first started at Trigeo, it was all Java. It was all Java based. Everything was real tab and modular. It was really, really basic setup there as far as the console goes.
Yeah, we want to go away from Flex, just like for pretty much all the products that we have acquired that we're running on Flash, Flex, whatever. We want to move them to just regular HTML, and a lot of them are single-page apps nowadays. But it's something that we know we are in the process of figuring out when this lands. Unfortunately, it's not coming as fast as a lot of us would like to actually get that done. But it is something that we are certainly kind of looking at. But it involves also discussions around are we keeping that LEM as a platform as it is right now? Do we move that on top of Orion? And if we do that, then do we solve other use cases? So it's part of a larger discussion.
Yeah, that's the problem. You start going, okay, well, let's change the UI, and you think, well, while I'm doing that, maybe I'll.
Well, the thing is, Orion is already providing a lot of services that you would need to rewrite this. It has basic dashboarding, it has basic, reporting and all of that stuff. And so you're like, okay, so we can build all that again in HTML on that platform, or we look at something else. So it's.
I think I heard you say something about the reason it's an appliance is compliance reasons, right? Keeping it separate and isolated.
Yeah.
So I could see that. And then having some kind of a connector to display it in Orion's interface without actually bringing all that into Orion, just a connector.
And it's certainly something that we have talked about, an integration module for LEM on top of Orion. Again, if we look back at the history of how we went with integrations in the past, where the federated model, that would be more in line with that. The problem is are you requiring two different installs for evaluating the same product, and that gets, it kind of goes against what SolarWinds is about, and so we're trying to figure out what is the right answer for this kind of multivariable equation there, and we're going to make a call at one point, but we haven't made that call yet.
It's really interesting. We've done a couple of surveys, customer surveys, and the majority of the people that responded said they would still want to keep that data separate, that log data separate, and not have it on I was surprised, and not have the data directly integrated with the monitoring platform. So it's
so from the server side, this is completely isolated from Orion right now.
It is.
So there is no dependency, like you said.
Yeah, there is no dependency. There is a basic integration, so they can communicate with each other via SNMP. Okay. So you can feed data from Orion to Login Event Manager, and from Login Event Manager to Orion as well.
And the data on the back end, are we still MS SQL again, or something separate?
No, this is Lucene and Postgres.
This is the Lucene side. Okay.
Completely embedded within the virtual appliance.
That's right, because of the compression and stuff. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Awesome.
That's it.
Yep.
Thank
so
you
I
guys.
think on this one is really the correlation engine is really something that is super powerful in this thing. We've actually we are looking at reusing this into some of the other products that we have, because it actually is nonlinear and it's really kind of dealing with a lot of data, and doing things over time windows. And so it's a really cool piece of technology that is really kind of differentiated compared to some of the other vendors that are in that space.
Let's get some machine learning going.
Yes.